The live television broadcast was interrupted. Ibrahim Traoré appeared on screen with the flags of 54 African Union member countries and their leaders behind him. Today, Africa's currency ends exploitation. Traoré showed a shining gold coin in his hand. The African United Dinar is our new currency backed by our continent's natural resources. We are recalling all our gold reserves from Western banks. Panic erupted in the New York and London stock exchanges. European central banks were called to emergency meetings. The CNN anchor was excitedly reporting, "We are witnessing a historic moment. The African continent has made the biggest financial independence move of the last 100 years, and Western economies are in shock. If one of these two is guilty and we alert them, they could destroy evidence." Just 1 hour after Ibrahim Traoré's announcement, the French president had gathered his cabinet for an emergency meeting at the Élysée Palace in Paris. Everyone in the room had panic on their faces. "This is impossible," said French Economy Minister Philippe Moreau, shuffling through his documents with trembling hands. "How could 54 countries conceal such a decision from us? Where was our intelligence?" Dr. Farida Zongo, the chief physician, checked Traoré's vital signs. Central Bank Governor Marie-Laurent pointed to the graphs on the screen. The value of West African countries' gold reserves in French banks is 150 billion euros. They are recalling all their reserves not only from French banks but also from Switzerland, Britain, and America. This means a major financial crisis. A total of 2.5 million euros has been deposited into Bamba's account, with the last payment made exactly 1 day before the tea poisoning. The foreign minister frowned. "Now I understand why Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger decided to close French military bases. This was a coordinated strategy. We should interrogate Bamba." The president took a deep breath. How long had Traoré been preparing this plan? Not yet. Intelligence Chief Jacques Renoir opened his file. According to our findings, the first meeting took place 6 months ago in Addis Ababa. After Traoré's closed speech to the African Union, 48 of the 54 countries signed a secret agreement. The details of this agreement have been kept completely secret until now. Albert Zongo? Why Traoré? He's just the leader of a small country. How could he influence the entire continent? Asked the president. Renoir answered, because he symbolized a leader who stood up against the West, determined to control his own resources. His decisions to nationalize gold mines, exit the CFA franc, and close French bases made him a hero on the continent. He never mentioned this. Meanwhile, at a meeting of financial analysts in London, former Bank of England Governor Sir William Harris was speaking. "The African United Dinar is not just a symbolic move, it's a real financial revolution," he said alongside the presentation on the screen. A currency backed by the collective gold, diamond, uranium, and oil reserves of 54 countries could be one of the world's strongest currencies. Traoré's eyes narrowed. An analyst asked, "How will the West respond?" "This is clear evidence." Harris's answer was clear: they can't respond. For the first time in centuries, Africa is fully controlling its own resources. This is a moment of reshaping global power balances. Monitor both of them closely. On Wall Street in New York, markets were crashing. Mining companies' shares experienced drops of up to 40% within hours. When banks realized they couldn't meet the withdrawal demands of African countries, the financial panic worsened. In Washington, the US president was in a meeting with his national security team in the Oval Office. "How did we not foresee this situation?" the president asked angrily. "An entire continent is changing its currency, and we learn about it this morning?" 3 hours later, Burkina Faso state television announced the sad news. "It is with deep regret that we announce President Ibrahim Traoré has passed away this evening due to the injuries he sustained in the assassination attempt." The Treasury Secretary spoke with concern. "Mr. President, this is not just a currency change. The African United Dinar challenges the dollar's dominance in international trade. A currency backed by Africa's rich natural resources could replace the dollar as the global reserve currency." People took to the streets, some crying, others protesting in anger. "Are you exaggerating?" the president asked skeptically. The economic advisor intervened. "Mr. President, the African continent holds 40% of the world's gold reserves, 65% of diamond reserves, 30% of uranium, and 90% of critical rare earth elements. The unification of these resources in a single currency is a real threat to dollar dominance." However, from a secret room, Traoré and his small team were watching the meeting through hidden cameras. "So what can we do?" Ibrahim Traoré appeared on screen with the flags of 54 African Union member countries and their leaders behind him. The National Security Advisor responded, "We have very few options. Military intervention is unthinkable. Economic sanctions would be ineffective against a now self-sufficient continent. Our only option is negotiation. Panic erupted in the New York and London stock exchanges. Meanwhile, at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, African leaders were in a historic meeting. Ibrahim Traoré received a standing ovation. "Today, we celebrate Africa's true Independence Day," said Traoré in a powerful voice. "For centuries, our resources were stolen, our economies exploited. Today, we take our destiny into our own hands." Everyone in the room had panic on their faces. The South African president took the floor. "We owe a debt of gratitude to our brother Ibrahim. Without his vision and courage, we wouldn't be here today." The African United Dinar is not just a currency, it's a declaration of independence. Where was our intelligence? The Kenyan president stood up and spoke. "Our experts predict that the dinar will gain 15% against the dollar and euro on its first day in world markets. This will be not just a financial victory, but a psychological one. The value of West African countries' gold reserves in French banks is 150 billion euros. Traoré returned to the podium. Now it's time to move to the second phase. After economic independence, technological independence. The foreign minister frowned. The leaders at the meeting listened attentively. Traoré started a new presentation, African Technology Union. "We should interrogate Bamba. Rare earth elements, coltan, cobalt, these are the fundamental materials of modern technology. Smartphones, electric cars, computers, they all depend on our resources. But until now, we exported these resources in raw form and bought back processed products at high prices." Intelligence Chief Jacques Renoir opened his file. On the screen appeared a map of new technology centers positioned in different regions of the African continent. "Now we will process our resources ourselves, produce our own technology, and export it to the world. Russia and China are ready to agree to technology transfer. The West's technological superiority is ending." Why Traoré? As this news spread, tech company CEOs in Silicon Valley, California, were in an urgent conference call. "This is nothing short of a disaster," said the CEO of a smartphone company. 70% of our components rely on rare elements from Africa. If we can't get them in raw form, our production lines will stop." His decisions to nationalize gold mines, exit the CFA franc, and close French bases made him a hero on the continent. The CEO of an electric car manufacturer added, "We get almost all the lithium and cobalt needed for our batteries from Africa. Prices have already increased by 200%. The African United Dinar is not just a symbolic move, it's a real financial revolution," he said alongside the presentation on the screen. At the United Nations Security Council, which had convened urgently, tension was high. Representatives from France, Britain, and the USA claimed that the African Union's decision posed a threat to international financial stability. An analyst asked, "How will the West respond?" Dr. Amina Diallo, the representative of the African Union, calmly responded, "Since when is controlling your own resources seen as a threat to international stability? African peoples are merely claiming their economic sovereignty after centuries of colonialism. For the first time in centuries, Africa is fully controlling its own resources." Russian and Chinese representatives announced their support for the African Union's decision. Western countries, despite threats to use their veto rights, failed to win majority support. At an economic summit in Berlin, the German chancellor expressed concerns. This could be the end of the West's economic presence in Africa. For the last 30 years, while China and Russia increased their influence on the continent, we stood by as spectators. Now it's time to pay. In Washington, the U.S. president was in a meeting with his national security team in the Oval Office. 2 days later, Ibrahim Traoré gave an exclusive interview to CNN. The anchor asked directly, "President Traoré, what do you aim to achieve with the African United Dinar? Is this a declaration of economic war against the West?" 3 hours later, Burkina Faso state television announced the sad news. "It is with deep regret that we announce President Ibrahim Traoré has passed away this evening due to the injuries he sustained in the assassination attempt." Traoré smiled. "This is not a war, it's a declaration of independence. We are simply reclaiming what naturally belongs to us. Africa will no longer be a raw material depot but a power shaping its own future." Are you exaggerating? Aren't you afraid of the West's reaction? History shows that leaders who rise up for economic independence often face military interventions. The National Security Advisor responded, "We have very few options." Traoré's answer was clear, "Those times are behind us. As members of the African Union, we have a joint defense pact. An attack on any country will be considered an attack on the entire continent. Also, have you forgotten? We now have economic power. We control the most important resources for Western companies. Today, we celebrate Africa's true Independence Day, said Traoré in a powerful voice. Economists say the African United Dinar will fail. Is it possible to unite 54 countries with very different economic structures under a single currency? Everyone in the room had panic on their faces. The European Union managed to unite 27 economically very different countries with the euro. Africa has a common past, a common struggle, and now a common vision. The dinar will succeed because we don't have the luxury of failing. Where was our intelligence? Just a week after the interview, the first results began to emerge. When the African United Dinar started trading in international markets, it took a strong position against the dollar and euro. Gold reserves withdrawn from Western banks were transferred to the newly established African Central Bank. The Financial Times in London headlined, "Africa's Financial Revolution is Real." The article noted that the dinar had gained 20% in the first week and was beginning to be accepted in international trade agreements. On the African continent, enthusiasm prevailed. The increase in the dinar's value was being watched live on large screens set up in public squares. People who had experienced economic hardships for many years were seeing real hope for the first time. However, this success didn't come easily. Western powers had initiated covert operations as a countermove. One morning, Ibrahim Traoré's special intelligence team presented an urgent report. Mr. President, Western intelligence services have started an operation to print large amounts of counterfeit money to lower the dinar's value. We've also detected cyber attacks aimed at the African Central Bank's digital systems. Smartphones, electric cars, computers, they all depend on our resources. Traoré immediately convened the African Union Security Council. The attacks have begun, but we are prepared. Our digital security teams, with the help of Russian and Chinese experts, are protecting our systems. We're implementing new security measures against counterfeit currencies. Russia and China are ready to agree to technology transfer. A month later, Ibrahim Traoré was the invited speaker at a special session of the World Economic Forum in Geneva. Western leaders and business people were now carefully listening to the young African leader they once dismissed. Winds of change are blowing, Traoré began his speech. For centuries, Europe and America set the rules of the world economy. Now, a new balance of power is forming. Africa is now an equal partner at the table. His decisions to nationalize gold mines, exit the CFA franc, and close French bases made him a hero on the continent. An American businessman in the hall asked a question, "President Traoré, what do you foresee for the presence of Western companies in Africa? Will nationalizations continue?" The African United Dinar is not just a symbolic move, it's a real financial revolution, he said alongside the presentation on the screen. Traoré's answer was diplomatic, "We are not against Western companies. We are not against fair partnerships. What we oppose is the theft of our resources and the exploitation of our people. We offer a new deal, equal partnership, technology transfer, and fair income sharing. Companies that accept these terms will always be welcome in Africa." For the first time in centuries, Africa is fully controlling its own resources. What is your message to Western governments? Western countries, despite threats to use their veto rights, failed to win majority support. The colonial era is over, said Traoré determinedly. The period of interfering in Africa's internal affairs, overthrowing our governments, and controlling our economies has ended. If you want to establish a new relationship as equal partners, our door is open. Otherwise, we will continue to chart our own course. 2 days later, Ibrahim Traoré gave an exclusive interview to CNN. After the conference, Traoré was surrounded by Western business people and politicians. All were seeking opportunities to do business with Africa's new economic power. Traoré noted the irony of the same people who once ignored him now seeking his attention. After the session, Traoré had a private meeting with Dr. Nkosi, the chairperson of the African Union. "Incredible success, Ibrahim," said Dr. Nkosi. "A month ago, no one gave us a chance. Now, Western banks and companies are lining up to transact in African United Dinars. Are you exaggerating?" Traoré nodded. "This is just the first step, Dr. Nkosi. Now, it's time to implement the African Technology Union and the African Defense Pact. We must support economic independence with technological and military independence." However, from a secret room, Traoré and his small team were watching the meeting through hidden cameras. Western powers will oppose this. There may be more provocations, more coup attempts. Who knew your schedule in all 3 cases? There may be, said Traoré. But we are now a united Africa. As individual countries, we were weak, but together, we are one of the most powerful blocs in the world. He keeps checking his phone. 3 months later, the New York Times headline shocked the world, "African United Dinar surpasses dollar in world trade volume." Aminata quickly scanned these names on her computer. The article noted that international trade agreements were now mostly conducted in dinars. Africa's raw materials could now only be purchased in exchange for dinars, forcing all countries to hold dinars in their reserves. Western economies were undergoing a major transformation to adapt to this new reality. Banks in Europe and America were competing to increase their dinar reserves. Companies were developing new strategies to access the African market. Meanwhile, as Traoré had predicted, the African Technology Union was also developing rapidly. Technology centers established in different regions of the continent had begun processing rare elements and producing indigenous technology. A year later, at the African Union Summit in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré was once again at the podium. This time, he was celebrating the first-year achievements of the dinar. "A year ago, we realized a dream that seemed impossible," he said, with graphs showing the rise of the dinar on the screen behind him. "The African United Dinar has become not just a currency but a symbol of independence and sovereignty." "Both are guilty," said Traoré after watching. Figures appeared on the screen. The total GDP of African countries had increased by 30%. Unemployment rates had fallen, investments had increased. Intra-African trade volume had doubled. "But most importantly," continued Traoré, "the world now takes us seriously. Africa's voice is heard on the global stage. Our resources serve our people. Stop Bamba at the airport." Traoré's speech was met with a standing ovation. African leaders witnessed how the young leader of a once small country had changed the continent's destiny. At the end of the summit, African leaders also approved Traoré's next vision, the African Space Agency. The continent was now ready to reach for the stars. That night, as Traoré looked at the lights of Ouagadougou from his hotel balcony, he reflected on his long journey. Once, a young leader struggling to save Burkina Faso's resources from Western companies. Now, the architect of an entire continent's economic revolution. In the room, on his desk, sat a sample of the newly designed African United Dinar coins. One side of the coin featured a map of the African continent, the other the slogan, "Unity, Power, Freedom." Now, according to our agreement, the new government will renew all agreements with French companies and stop the establishment of the Russian military base. Traoré picked up the coin and smiled. Western powers were in shock, their economic models shaken. And it all started with a single move.